Exodus chapter 20. And though this is the last commandment that we will see, it will not be our last lesson. Next week we'll look at a concluding lesson in the Ten Commandments. We opened up and had a little bit of an introduction, and I had a completely different closing, and we were going to look at the Ten Commandments and how they apply and how they've done things. But then I was reading past Exodus 20, verse 17, and I think there's something completely different we're going to talk about in the concluding portion of this, because, you know, God always has a better plan than we do. And the best thing to do is just look to the Word of God for what you're going to preach, I found. But we've pushed right through, and we've gone through 9 of the 10 commandments. And this evening, we are going to look at a sin that no one wants to admit to. No one will claim this sin. No one wants to say that this is something that they have done in the past, or they do on a daily basis, or they do. Exodus 20, verse 17, this is God, of course, still speaking. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. This is a dangerous sin. They're all dangerous. This is a commandment that is it's very intrusive into your lives. And it's the one sin, when we're looking at the sin between man and man, that God establishes. Remember, the first 4 commandments were between our relationship between God and man. These last 6 have been between man and man. Now, you could definitely see or tell when someone's lying. When someone lies, it comes out of their mouth, you hear it, and then you can find out the truth. When you bear false witness against someone, or you're trying to tear them down, people can hear that, and they can understand that, and they can see that sin. It's a visible sin. Covetousness, and to covet something that someone else has, is very secret. Because I could stand here and be coveting anything out in front of me, and none of you would have any idea. Matter of fact, you could be sitting and coveting something around anyone around you, and no one would have any idea, because it's a sin in your mind. It's an inward sin. It's a sin that many people almost think is a victimless crime, if you will. That it's not something that everyone sees. It doesn't hurt anybody. I'm not bowing down to a graven image. I'm not lying. I'm not tearing down anybody's home. I'm not committing adultery. I'm not doing any of these things. This is just my personal wants. And that's how we brush over it. But the sin of covetousness, to covet what someone else has, the sin that no one will admit to, is detrimental to you spiritually. And then it will become detrimental to you physically as well. It can kill your testimony. It can kill your walk with God. And this is one sin we'll see here in just a few minutes. This is one sin that actually can branch off and cause all the other sins we've talked about. To covet something, to desire something that is not yours, to be jealous. What's what we'll say? Oh, I'm a little jealous of that. Not jealous. You want what that person has. And you will then make plots and plans in your mind, if you dwell on it enough, that you will figure out a way to get what that person has. And then that leads you into all these other sins. I think I've said from behind the pulpit before, matter of fact, I know I have, that in studying in my mind and reading the Word of God, I've come to the conclusion that pride was the first sin. I think that Satan, Lucifer, when he was in heaven, it was his pride that caused him to take arms up against God in heaven, and was cast down, and he was cast to the earth, and that's where he is today because of his pride. And when you see Satan approaching people, most typically his first go-to is your pride. I think that is the original sin in my mind, that pride that Satan possessed and that Satan enacted on. And then if you look at being covetous, and if you're coveting something, that is very closely akin to pride. I have a story here that I want to read. I found it and I copied it and put it here. In November 16th, 1930, there was a lady named Henrietta Garnett. She was a lonely 81-year-old woman. She was a widow. She died at her home in Philadelphia. And unwilling, she had a huge wealth, and she had a vast amount of things over her life. And unwittingly and unknowingly, she caused one of the greatest inheritance litigation scandals in U.S. history. She died in 1930, and when she died, as they say, intestate, without a will. That's the way everybody in West Virginia apparently wants to die. Let's just leave it all to the family, share and share alike, and then they fight and scrap over it for the rest of their lives. She died without a will, and this lady was worth $17 million. That is well over $1 billion in today's money. $17 million estate. And she had no will, no living heirs, and no one to lay claim on what she had. Over the next several years, people came out of the woodwork claiming that they were her illegitimate children. People came out of the woodwork claiming to be a first cousin or a second cousin twice removed. People came out of the woodwork even claiming to be an ex-spouse, though she had only been married to her husband who had passed away before her. People lied and they stole and they cheated to try and get a piece of this inheritance, this money that they wanted so badly. As a result of this lady passing away and everyone around her that was coveting what she had and what she had possessed during her life, let me see here, more than 2,600 people in 47 states in 29 foreign countries, represented by more than 3,000 lawyers over a period of time to try and obtain what this woman had, because they coveted that money, that $17 million. As a result of all the litigation and all of the lying and all of the things that happened trying to get this woman's money that had passed away, 12 people were confined to prison, 10 received jail sentences, 2 committed suicide before they could be tried, and 3 were murdered. All because all these people wanted what that woman had. That is the height of coveting what someone has. It is a sin that is detrimental and is terrible. I want to look at the sin of covetousness, and we're going to see why it reflects so poorly on us as Christians and how it can destroy us. Number one, covetousness, it diseases all of life. When you are coveting, it diseases every portion of your life. It makes us greedy of gain. When we are possessed, when we're possessed by this covetousness heart and this spirit, we will never be satisfied with what we have. And it will affect every area of your life. It's a disease that touches every portion. If you desire greatly, the word covet means to desire greatly. It is usually used as a reference to an object, but it can also refer to a quality of life or something that someone else has or a situation that they live in. And when you have that covetous heart, it's a disease that affects everything because it makes you greedy of gain. And then once you gain the thing you covet, guess what? You'll just want to gain something else. It's like diabetes. Diabetes is one of the few disease processes in the human body that affects everything. If you have diabetes, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't know if they broke it down for you, but diabetes affects everything from your risk for cancer to heart disease to kidney failure to blood pressure to Alzheimer's to dementia. If you're in a nursing program and the answer is diabetes, you should always pick it because it affects every body system, every single body system. Covetousness, and to have covetousness in your heart and to covet affects every spiritual body system you have. Every spiritual system, everything. It gives you that desire and it makes you greedy. It makes you greedy of gain and then more gain. Not only does it do that, it also makes us grab at another person's wealth. According to this verse, a covetous heart may cause you to go after things that are not yours to go after. This verse says that men can covet property, people, and possessions. When we come to the place where we are willing to do anything to have that which does not belong to us, then we will cross over into sin, and we will do things that we never thought possible that we would do. Let's look at the things that God tells us that we can covet after. Number one, he says property. Look with me in our text again. He says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. That's property. It refers to the house. It's something that they possess, not only their house, but maybe their boat or their land or their farm or their tractor or whatever it is that they own. If somebody owns it, people will covet it. They'll be jealous of it and they'll desire to have it. You know, there's something very interesting that happens in a subdivision. I grew up out in the sticks in Lost Creek, Kentucky. And my closest neighbor was a quarter mile that way, and my other neighbor was about a half mile that way. So there wasn't a whole lot of people around. Candace grew up in a holler too. And now there were people a little closer, but they were all kin to her. And they were all in the same boat. You know, we was all poor country people. So there wasn't a whole lot of this that happened where we grew up. But since we became cityfied, and we don't say our eyes like we used to as much anymore, we live in a subdivision. And something very interesting happens in the subdivision, and I can only attribute it to us men coveting what other men have. And this is the way it works. 50 houses in Meadowlands Estates. All it takes is for one man to buy a new pickup truck. This is evidence-based practice. I've seen it happen. And I'll blame Kevin for this one, for one. He had a little Toyota, and he bought a new pickup, full-size pickup. Can't remember what it was. And he drove that thing in and parked it beside my house. Boy, I said, man, that looks good. Kevin got a new truck. And then every man in the neighborhood, hey, Kevin got a new truck. Men that weigh 550 pounds a day, never walked around the block in their life, walked around to see that truck. Look at Kevin's truck. Kevin got a new truck. What happened? I got a new truck in about a year. And then what happened? My friend and my neighbor Ty, he got a new truck too. And then what happened after Ty got one? Well, then Mr. Grayhouse down the street that lives next to Ty, he got a new truck. By the end of a 5-year period, because one man just said, hey, I'm tired of driving this little Toyota I've had for 50 years. And he said, I'm going to go buy me a new pickup. I've saved up and bought. He bought it. And the rest of us, whether we admit it or not, we all did have a little jealousy, and we all coveted that a little bit, just enough that we all went in debt and bought us a truck too. Out of the men that live in the neighborhood, I'd say after one man gets a new vehicle, a new truck, probably 10 to 20 will get a new one within a year. Why? Well, that just made me think. If we're honest, it made us covet a little bit what we didn't have that someone else did. Well, now, we're all honest people, and we all like each other. We're all neighborly. We're not going to go over and steal Kevin's truck or Ty's truck or Mr. Gray. We're not going to go steal off of each other, so we do the next best thing. We just rob ourselves of the money we don't have and go take out a loan that we can't afford to buy something we don't need. See how that works? All because of an innocent thing. All because an innocent man purchased an innocent thing that he needed. And then all these other people around begin to covet that thing at which they see, and they covet that property. So you see, we can covet property. We can look at what people have and what they own and desire to have it. The same is true of anything. Any big purchase, and men, we're the world's worst for this. Ladies, they buy things anyways. They don't care if another lady has it or not. But I tell you what, if you want to see how it works, you just let a man buy a new bass boat or a new four-wheeler, or a new side-by-side, or a new tractor, whatever he may get. You wait and see till how long it is till one of his friends gets something new too. It's because we have that desire in us. We covet after things. So yes, we can covet property, but the scripture also tells us that we can covet people. It mentions the neighbor's wife, and then it also mentions the people that work for him. But in this context, as we're looking at people, it says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. You see, this is a sin that leads to another sin. It is a verse that mentions a desire for another man's spouse. If you look at a person, remember, Remember what we said when we were talking about adultery and sexual sin. If you look at a person and you lust after them in your heart, Jesus Christ holds us to the higher standard in the New Testament. He says, if you look and lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. You've committed sin in your heart already. Remember that higher standard? Now, if you look at someone's spouse and covet after them, it's the same thing. This covetous heart, not being happy with what you have and desiring what someone else has, leads to other sin. Remember, this sin of looking and wanting and desiring to have strongly will lead you into other sins. If you're looking at property, yeah, it was funny to think about all those men like a gaggle of geese following the new guy around with the truck and buying things. What if you don't have the ability to go out and take out a loan and get in debt that you don't need to buy something that you don't really need? Well, people will steal it. It's not right for you to have it, and I want it, so I want to take it. Same thing happens when we covet after people. Not only a man's spouse or a woman's spouse to covet after them and to maybe lead into a sin, but also when we look at their families and we say, man, that family's better than my family. I want that family. People may not go and try to steal that family away, but what do? It leads them to not stay where they are and go astray and seek out another family. Covetousness leads to terrible sin. All you have to do is look at David and Bathsheba. And what did David do? He was on the roof, he looked and he saw, and he began to covet, and then he went into further sin. So not only people, but also possessions. Our verse says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservants, nor his maidservants, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbors. Among the items listed are servants, animals, and anything that belongs to my neighbor. Well, Brother David, I think you said manservant, maidservant. I think that's a little bad taste. You have to understand at this time, when this law is written, if you were in debt to someone and you couldn't pay that debt, you became their bondservant, you became their servant, you became an indentured servitude. And yes, they were viewed as something that person possessed. So though it's not something that we see today, this is what God is saying. He says anything that is a possession of that person. Today we wouldn't think of it as maidservant or manservant. We think of it as their employer, or if they had someone work for them, their employees, their businesses, their animals, their any possession, anything that they possess. We should not covet those things. Because what happens when we begin to covet those things, we begin to get greedy and try to steal and take those things which do not belong to us. I remember whenever I used to work at Arbors at Gallipolis, I was in staff development there. And that meant I hired and trained, did orientation with all the new hires. So I knew all of the nurses and aides pretty well because I had hired most of them and put them through orientation. Well, I went to work for another nursing home just about 2 blocks away, just over the hill. I went to work for Abbyshire Place, and we needed staff at Abbyshire Place. And I said, I know where I can get staff at Arbors at Gallipolis because I hired and trained most of them. So what would I do? I'd go over on my break and I'd make nice with those people. And I knew how much all of them made because I made them their offer of employment. I'd say, hey, you're making this much here. I'll give you $2 more an hour over there. And pretty soon I had stolen all of those employees away. Why? Because I coveted them. I wanted them. To the point when the director of nursing, who was my good friend, she saw me coming onto the property one day at my break, and she said, you got to leave. If you come back here again, I'm going to call the law and tell them you're trespassing, you're taking all my employees. Well, that's just good, solid business sense, right? No, I mean, really in life, we covet something, and then what do? We do something sneaky and underhanded to possess it. And I'm here to tell you, that was sneaky and underhanded of me. You see, we should not covet the possessions of someone else. When we are possessed by that covetous heart, we have ceased to trust the Lord to meet our needs, and instead we are looking to acquire that which does not belong to us. This ruins your life. So covetousness is a disease, and it diseases all life. Every aspect of your life, it can ruin. Covetousness, that's a hard word to say, disregards God's law. When you covet, you may be in this position where you're about ready to commit other sins because of your unnatural and the desire that God does not want you to have for something that isn't yours. We talked about it in the opening, that as we go through, we can look back at the other 9 commandments and we could see how when you begin to covet, it will lead you into these other sins as well. You begin to covet, and that's an internal sin, and it's not hurting anybody but you to want this and want that and desire this and be jealous of that. But we can see if we take our time and look in verse 3. Let's back up and just stroll down through the 10 commandments. Verse 3, what do we see? Verse 3 says this: thou shalt have no other gods before me. You place money and possessions ahead of God, and guess what? You're guilty of having another God above Jehovah God. Whenever you desire things that aren't yours and money that isn't yours, then all of a sudden that pursuit of things that you don't have becomes your God, and God takes a second seat to it. Verse 4 through 6, what do we see? Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or likeness of anything in heaven before, that is in the earth beneath, or the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down yourself before it. God says that you shouldn't bow down to a graven image. So when you begin to covet, it leads you in this sin because you bow down at the altars of materialism and greed. You refuse to bow down before God and to give him what is due him because you are worshiping at the altar of self and stuff. So when you begin to covet, it leads you right down to the graven image, right down to the gods above God. In verse 7, we see that you begin to blaspheme. In verse 7, what does it say? Thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. You can't say you shouldn't blaspheme God, but when you begin to covet, it affects your heart and the way you think, and you will blaspheme God's name in an effort to acquire your things and your stuff that you don't need, that God hasn't given you. I don't care what God says. I want to do this because I want it, because it's good for me, because it's what I want. Well, you might not be dropping the big GD that we talked about. Remember, we said God's last name is not damn. You may not say that out of your mouth, but you say it with your spirit. You'll blaspheme God and say, whatever God says, I don't care. And you will go right into the life of being blasphemous before God. Verse 9 through 11, you start to forget the Lord's day and keep it holy. You don't worry about going to church. Some people have to work on Sunday, and some people have to. I mean, that's part of the gig, and I get it. And I've never been a pastor that whenever somebody says, Pastor David, I got to work, I don't guilt them into it. I don't say, listen, I've had to work on Sunday myself. I completely understand. But whenever you start to covet and the boss comes and says, listen, we can give you overtime on Sunday. You'll get triple time. And the last thing you think about is, oh, I need to be at church on Sunday. And the first thing you think about is, yes, I can get the stuff that I want. You see, there's a big difference in being on a boat or on the road, being on the river for a month. I mean, them boys ain't going to jump off that boat and swim back to church on Sunday. I mean, I know they're watching church on their phone. I know Dan and Josiah do. You know how I know? Because he talks to me about sermons that I preach. I mean, that's what that's there for. I'm talking about whenever you have the opportunity to serve God or serve self and you say, I'm going to serve self. I'm not talking about if the boss says you're going to be fired if you're not here next weekend. I'm talking about when it is a choice that you choose. Yes, I would rather do this than to be there. I would rather do this than to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So you see that covetousness leads you into that sin. Verse 12, many parents are treated poorly and they're cast aside because there's too great of a financial burden on their children. How many times do you hear, remember, it says, honor thy father and mother in the Lord, for this is right. It's the first commandment with promise. But people are so covetous and they desire stuff so much that their parents in their old age, they get a back seat in a nursing home in the backwaters somewhere that they never have to see because they don't have to deal with them because they got to get their stuff. It's not that they don't have the ability to take care of them. It's not that the parents are too sick to be taken care of. Sometimes those things happen. It's just that the things that they desire are more important to them than the parents that God gave them. You see how this sin just creeps in and it engulfs us and it takes over every part of our lives. Verse 13, many are dead because someone wanted what belonged to someone else. Verse 14, many marriages are in shambles because people desire to have a spouse of someone else. Many people have neglected their families in order to go out and earn money. Pastor friend of mine, he's not a pastor anymore, his wife left him. And we were having a conversation after his wife left him, and he told me, he said, and looking back, he said, my wife was my last priority. He said, that's my fault that she left. Well, he was a pastor. What do you mean? Well, listen, I hate to tell you folks, but my family is my first ministry. And if the church was going to wreck my family, God expects me to leave this church and tend to my family. That's why it says that a pastor should be the husband of one wife. His house should be in order and all of these things. Pastors need to take sabbaticals if they need to tend to their first ministry before they go to their second ministry, which is the church. And that's scriptural, and I don't care what anybody says. Pastors sacrifice their families and their spouses on the altar of their service to God when really they just covet to have the ministry that God didn't give them that somebody else has. You see, you have to understand that once we begin to covet, even if we wrap it up in the bow of saying, oh, I'm doing this for God, really is your motive to do that for God, or is your motive to do it for self and your own self-worth? That's where we have to be careful. So marriages are in shambles. Verse 15, it goes without saying that stealing is a result of being coveting what is yours. Verse 9 through 16, people will lie and spread gossip and destroy other people's reputations to get what they have. You see, it is something that affects every other commandment, this heart of having covetousness in your heart. It's like when you have that covetousness spirit, it's wicked and sinful. Jesus Christ warned about it in his earthly ministry. If you look with me in Luke 12:15. Luke 12 and verse 15, Jesus Christ says this. He said unto them, take heed. That means pay attention. Look out. Listen to what I say. Take heed and beware of covetousness. For a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. Jesus said, don't look at what you don't have. Look at what I've given you, because that's all you need. It's the sin that we don't talk about because it doesn't hurt anybody, but in reality, it diseases all of life and it disregards God's law. God says, don't do it. It's something that just comes in so simple, and it's just such a small thing. But once we take on that spirit of wanting what isn't ours, wanting what we don't have, it can destroy everything. So not only does it disregard God's law, and it leads us merrily to offend the other 9 commandments which were laid out before it, it denies the Lord. When you have this covetousness spirit and you covet things and want things that aren't yours, you're denying God. As a Christian, it demonstrates a lack of faith. What do you mean it demonstrates a lack of faith? Just because I want nice things? I'm not talking about wanting nice things. I'm not talking about wanting to better yourself. These are godly thoughts, to want to better yourself. God doesn't even care if you're rich. Praise God, if you're rich, be rich, tithe. You know what? It's not about wanting to better yourself. You mean if I want to go back to school and be a doctor, that's bad? No, that's you wanting to better yourself and your family and serving God. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about demonstrating a lack of faith when God puts you in a place and provides for you and it's not good enough for you. Philippians 4:19 says this. But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. Whenever you lose sight of the fact that God has given you what you need and start thinking that you need more than God has given you, and that spirit rises up within you that I don't care what I have to do, who I have to cheat, who I have to lie to, what I have to sacrifice, how it affects my family, how it affects my walk with God. I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to get more stuff. You are showing a complete lack of faith in God. I was talking to somebody the other day. They were talking about a situation they're in. Not an easy situation. And they said, but you know what? I already know God's got something waiting for me. That's faith. It would be much easier for this individual, instead of having faith, God's already got something better. So God's got something lined out. And I don't know what it is, but God's got it for me. It'd be much easier for that individual to say, I don't know what God's thinking, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to do what I want to do to get what I need. See the difference? You know how you can tell that you're coveting things and wanting things and you're not relying on God? Did you pray about it? Well, if the answer is no, then I hate to tell you, you're relying on yourself and it's killing your faith. Did you ask God if it was His will? Did you wait on the Lord to see if it is what He had for you or if it was what you wanted for yourself? Every door that opens is not a door that God wants you to go through. Every door that opens is not a door that's opened by God. Sometimes you walk into things because you have no faith that God will give you something better if you wait. You know, I've done that. I've taken jobs that I shouldn't have taken because I was going to take care of me. God's never going to give me, my ship's never going to come in. God's never going to give me this something that I desire where I can do things that I want to do. God's not going to give it to me. So I'm going to have to help God out. Why did I do that? Because of my pride and my covetous spirit. And then I had to eat crow, walk myself back, and then guess what? God opens up a door and He says, hey, dummy, this is what I had for you. You just had to wait and have a little faith and put faith in me to take care of you. You see, we don't want to have that spirit where we're coveting so much that it kills the faith that we have in God. It not only shows that we have a lack of faith, it demonstrates a lack of faithfulness. When we allow that to covet things and it dominates our heart and our lives, we become a slave to the things we want, and we become a slave to the things that we think we need. We become a slave to our greed and our wandering eyes, and then all that faithfulness to God goes away. There's an article in Reader's Digest told about a zoologist. He designed an experiment in which an ape was introduced to a profit motive. To accomplish this, the zoologist first taught the animal to draw and paint, and he found that he was very capable of doing both. It was something that was great. He could draw and paint pretty well, almost as good as a 6th or 7th grader in art class, this ape. He trained him how to do that. After he trained him to paint, then he began to reward him with peanuts for his work, a treat that the ape loved. He began to notice that after time, the ape became greedy and wanted more peanuts. And the quality of his work went down that he was painting and drawing so that he could get more peanuts. To the point where the ape digressed back in his art skill to where he would just scrawl anything on a piece of paper and want a treat. The zoologist said, I have made a greedy capitalist out of a beautiful artist. You see, it is something that applies to us. He introduces commercialism and needing something, and it ruined him and what he was able to do. And that's exactly what happens to us as Christians. God gives us a beautiful talent, a beautiful ministry, a beautiful thing he wants us to do, and we become good at it and proficient at it, and he loves us for it, and we serve him with it. But then somewhere along the line, we start to get greedy, and we stop worrying about what we're doing for God and worry about the stuff we can get. And then we're just scrawling any old junk down and say, here you go, God, give me the money. Give me the stuff. Give me the things. If you want to see a better example, look at 99.9% of any fool that stands behind a television camera and calls himself a televangelist. I hate to tell you, some of those guys used to be good. Some of those guys used to be down the road, hellfire, brimstone preachers. Used to pastor churches just like this. Somewhere along the line, though, somebody said, you're really good. And you know what they started to do? They started to listen. Then they started to give God any garbage they could get to get the money that they saw. That's what a covetous heart will do. It will destroy your faithfulness. We can never be faithful to the Lord as long as we are consumed by other things in life. Jesus Christ must fill our vision, our wants, and our desires, and until he does, everything else is out of balance. There is nothing wrong with possessing things. Nothing wrong. Not at all. What is wrong is when things possess you. I'll tell you a good example. I know this couple, man. They're both devastatingly good looking and college educated. Got amazing kids too. Only thing wrong with the guy, he's bald and he talks too much. But I'll tell you a little story about this young couple. They started out with goals. We're gonna buy our first house. By the time we're 25, 23, we bought our first house. Woo! Made some good financial decisions. It's easy to make good financial decisions when you ain't got no money, when you flat broke. It's easy to decide what. So yeah, we set out some things. It's me and Candace, by the way, in case. But we were sitting around talking the other day. And we've always been pretty practical. Your vehicle should get you from point A to point B. We don't care if bells, whistles, anything like that. We really get a deal. I joke about being a Chevy man, but I've driven Oldsmobiles and Dodges and everything else under the sun, whatever I got the best deal on. Well, this young, bright, intelligent couple that you guys don't know, they went to a car dealership, and they went in to buy a practical vehicle with a low payment, something that would get them from point A to point B. And man, they took them to the showroom floor, and they showed them this Dodge Citadel. And it had leather and bells and whistles, and we said, we deserve this. That guy just sucked us right in. You know what he used? He used our pride. He used our covetous spirit that everyone possesses. You know why car dealers have a pretty easy job sometimes? They work a lot of hours and stuff. All they have to do is just appeal to your lesser nature. And you'll drive off that car lot and payment book comes in. You say, this was the dumbest investment I've ever made. Everybody does it. Everybody. We all see things. I need that. I want that. And sometimes people think that to covet is just to look at something that someone else has. Man, that's a nice car. I want to steal that from him. That's not what that means. It means to look at something you don't need and try to possess it. And that takes over your spirit, your mind. And that's what happens. And if we're not careful, it bleeds over into everything. Sometimes it's not just dumb decisions you make about buying something. Sometimes it's decisions you make about how you're serving God, how you treat your family, how you treat other people. There are some people that the only thing they see when they look at you is someone to step on their way to get to what they want. Why is that? It's because they've given over to that covetousness in their heart, and that's all they see. Not too many years ago, there was Pepsi-Cola did a promotion where they had bottle caps. Remember that? Bottle caps, you unscrew them, and you win like I always want another bottle of Pepsi. It's always what I got. Get another bottle of Pepsi. But they did have bottle caps where you could win $100 or $50 of Pepsi points or whatever. There was one bottle cap that had $1 million winner on it. There was a lady that she went to work, she opened her Pepsi, she drank it, and she did not even realize that she had the $1 million Pepsi bottle cap in her possession. She set it down and did not think about it, and then she went and she threw it away. The lady sitting in the cubicle next to her saw this. She went, she got the bottle cap out, unscrewed it, expecting to win a Pepsi. Instead, saw it was $1 million winner. These women were tied up in court for years. They had been best friends, maid of honor at each other's wedding, godmother to each other's children, and they went from that to hating each other, all because of a thing. Money and things don't make you happy. Serving God is the only thing that does. So we should always remember that. Don't covet things. Don't covet the things that you don't have. You know why? Because God doesn't want you to have them. What does he say? He says, thou shalt not cover thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not cover thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. It doesn't lead to a good quality of life if we desire things that aren't ours. Every head bowed and every eye closed.